All right. Thanks, everyone. Welcome to our deep dive today. I'm very excited to be presenting this topic with one of our fellow AEM champs. And I'll allow her to introduce herself in just a moment here. Next slide, Brad. So, just as a few housekeeping rules, no self promotion of any kind is allowed during this presentation. Please don't reach out to other people without their consent. And if there's any use cases that are shared here during this meeting, please also don't share that out without their consent. And next slide. This is being recorded. If you do not want to be recorded, now's the time to exit, but you can feel free to watch this recorded session. It will be posted later after this meeting. And if you have any questions about that, you can always reach out to advocacy@adobe.com. So today's topic is, whose form is it anyway? We are going to do a deep dive on forms. Now, I've always been a huge fan of forms, and I am fairly new to AEM forms and all the different types of forms you can use with AEM. So I brainstormed this idea with one of our AEM champs, and we are very excited to present today. My name is Brittany Young. If you haven't met me before, I currently am a senior technical product manager at AWS, and I'll turn it over to my co-host to introduce herself.
Thanks, Brittany. So my name is Angèle Taylor, and as Brittany suggested, I'm actually from the AEM side of the house. So my specialty is actually in AEM Forms specifically, because AEM is broken down into several different pieces, and my specialty is forms. I'm currently the director of marketing at 4Point, but I originally started off as a software developer, so I really know how everything works under the hood with AEM. And I've been working with forms for almost 10 years now. So hopefully I can answer all of your questions. I've seen a lot of fun scenarios, and I'm super excited. And I'm so happy that the Marketo team has invited me to come here and have these conversations, because I'm excited to be able to start talking more about how the AEM or Adobe products in general work together with each other, because that's really where a lot of the Adobe products get a lot of their powers, how well they integrate together with each other.
Yeah, and I would also like to add to that. This is our first time presenting, kind of co-presenting on with two champs from two different programs together. This has been something we've heard a lot from the community about content that's kind of bridging the gaps between Marketo, AEM, analytics, all of that. So I'm very excited that I get to collaborate with Angèle on this. And next slide, Brad. So for our agenda today, we're going to go over just what is a form, because that you may hear a form, and I know in Marketo world, my head is going to go directly to what that means in Marketo. But we're going to go over not only what does that mean in Marketo, but also AEM. And then the part that we really want to get into is all of those use cases. So whether that be personalized PDFs or how you could do your customer journeys. And then the ones we all love with our basic contact us forms on our websites. And then we'll leave some time open for Q&A as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Angèle to just dig into what is a form.
Perfect. Thanks, Brittany. And I know it sounds like a silly question, what is a form? But I always like to start any kind of forms conversation off with, what is a form? And as I've said that, you're all probably thinking of something. And if you press the button, there's some animation here. This is probably what you're thinking of. Or worse than this, a clipboard that somebody handed to you with a piece of paper and a pen, and they want you to fill that out. The digital version's a little bit better. But this isn't what a form is, and I want to get people away from that. If you press the animation for the next one, Brad, a form by definition is a structure with space in which you can write or select content, which is super vague. And what this means really is that we need to start thinking of a form not by its 8 by 11 structure that we're so used to. What we need to start thinking about is how we can just capture information. That's what a form really is. And there are so many different tools that will allow you to make different types of forms. Brad, if you can move into the next. So I want you to think as we go through and we talk about forms, escaping the medium. Paper is really what we were talking about in most people's minds, but I like to use the analogy of music. If you take a song, let's say Michael Jackson's Thriller or something like that, you can get it on a record, you can get it on a cassette, you can get it on a CD, you can put it on your favorite device, you can get it in the cloud. But you know what? The song itself is still Thriller, which is a fabulous song. Forms can do the same thing. You can have form in a paper form or a digital form or a web application, which you're going to see later. Forms have been so many different things, and they're going to continue to grow. And I want you guys to stay open-minded. Remember the definition. It is just about gathering information. We can move on to the next slide. So I'm going to pass it back over to Brittany, and she's going to do an overview of what Marketo Forms are. And then I'll come back and I'll tell you what AEM Forms are.
Thanks, Angel. So before I get into all the deep dive of Marketo Forms, please keep in mind, this is high level on purpose, okay? So for all of us super Marketo nerds, don't come at me because I'm trying to keep it fairly high level so we could get into more of the nitty gritty of just what AEM Forms has to offer, and especially the use cases where, you know, you might consider that versus Marketo and all of that. So go ahead, Brad. First, one of the features is progressive profiling. We know when you have a Marketo form, you could choose to initially only show a few fields to only that way only keep it as few fields as possible on the form. And then over time, as a person returns to your page, you can show additional fields to collect additional information. The next feature is with pre-fill. I know we're probably all very familiar with this kind of functionality, even like with Google Chrome, for example. That's basically allowing unknown visitors form fields to already be filled out when they return, so they don't have to complete the form again. And then there's hidden fields, which these are used most often, I've seen, for capturing things like a particular lead source or even like your UTMs. So those hidden fields are not shown on the form to the user, they're on the back end, and that allows you to really be able to, you know, track your conversions. And then with visibility rules, these are real, I always love to use those on Marketo Forms, especially when you want to only show certain fields to certain people. In my past experience, I've used this most often when I'm trying to segment different audiences. Like one example, I had a company that had both like a patient-facing website and the website was also for employers. And so one of our fields on the form was, are you a patient or an employer? Then based on what the person selected, we would hide and show the additional subsequent fields that were asked after that. And then lastly, with your thank you pages, Marketo Forms allow you to select what you want to show up after the form is completed. So that could be directed to a different page on your website, a Marketo landing page, or even if you just wanted to show a simple thank you message. Now, next I'm going to talk through some of the benefits of Marketo Forms. So one of the key benefits is the flexibility. You can really use Marketo Forms just about anywhere. I've used them in various different CMS platforms, on Marketo landing pages. They're also fairly easy to use for marketers. that's one of the benefits I've seen across many marketing teams is they have that ability to easily deploy a landing page with a form for, say, like a webinar or any other type of event. There's also advanced customization you could do with the Marketo Forms API. I will not even get into that. There's some really cool other deep dive topics we could go into on that. But Marketo Forms really allow you to have that sort of customization. And then the integrations, Marketo is typically integrated directly with your CRM. In most cases, there's some that may have like custom integration, but if you have that direct sync between Marketo and, let's say, like Salesforce, for example, all of the information that is put in your form can go directly into your CRM and routed according to whatever your lead routing rules are. And Marketo Forms also help you prevent duplicates. So if it is a known visitor that comes with the same email address, all of their information that's tied to their cookie will then be tied to that existing record in Marketo, so that you can, keep it all in one user journey. And then on the con side, or there's some considerations. We have known, the bot issue that has happened sometimes with Marketo Forms. Adobe has made some improvements with that, but it's still something to consider that might be an issue for you with Marketo Forms. Also with the branding, a lot of times your Marketo landing page may not look exactly like your website, and or even the domain might not be a branded subdomain. And so that might be another, downside to using it. Some of the features that I mentioned previously, like your pre-fill as well as your progressive profiling, that doesn't work with all form types. So you can have a form on a Marketo landing page and you get all of that. But when you do it on like using a form embed on the website, some of that native functionality is not there without some additional customization. And then the last consideration is tracking. Again, if you're not necessarily using Marketo landing pages, it's not as, like, I would say, turnkey when you're embedding the form on your website. There's going to be some additional things you have to do in order to track those form conversions properly. And Angel, we'll go ahead and talk about AEM Forms.
Perfect. Thanks, Brittany. So I'm going to throw a whole lot of information at you guys, and I know it's a lot because you guys are the Marketo team. Let me know in the chat if any of you guys have any experience with AEM, but I'm going to run through this quickly so that way we can go in and we can start talking about use cases specifically. And if you have any other questions, we can bring them back at the end, or we can find another time to chat, because AEM is a beast on its own. So just from a high level, Adobe Experience Manager is its own separate solution. And within that solution, there are 5 sub-modules that you can purchase. So the idea is Adobe Experience Manager is used to create content that is personalized for people who are interacting with it. And depending on what type of content you are trying to use, different tools are better fitted for those things. The default, when people say AEM, they mean AEM sites. That is the majority of what people are using when they're using the Experience Manager suite. Assets would probably be the follow-up to that. But so for our high level, sites lets you build web pages. Assets allows you to create versions of your assets and keep track of them. Gives them a central location for where they're being used, which can also still integrate with sites and forms, so that way you have a single repository for everything. Guides, think of online manuals. Think about if you bought like a bread maker or something along those lines, and they give you that pamphlet, that little book that comes with it to tell you how to use it. You can create like an online version of that. It's still pretty static. You can do some quick links and things like that, but think more of a how-to instructional thing is what Guides is. Screens is interesting, but you have to have a very specific use case. Screens, an example of people using screens is Las Vegas. If you go down the strip and you see those big signs, especially because Vegas Summit's coming up, those advertisements done with screens, and I'm also pretty sure the McDonald's ordering system is also done with screens. But the idea is that the imagery goes on multiple screens or weird resolutions, those kind of things. That's what screens is really good for. And Forms is the entire solution for creating and capturing data and presenting data. So if we go to the next slide, we can show a high-level summary of what's actually included in the AEM Forms product. And it is a complete solution. It can do it all. It can do it all the way from the beginning of authoring it, creating it, helping people find it, doing the processing and the rules behind it, securing the information, linking it back so you can track how it's being used. There's different versions of it. It's really a complete solution. I'm not going to go too deep into this because you could get lost in the weeds. I have a couple other slides that'll bring it up a level for you guys. So if we go to the next one, we can see these are some of the types of forms. So I want you guys to think about these as we move into the use cases. So you can think, what would I think would be useful when I'm trying to do this kind of a scenario? Would this meet my use case? So the traditional one that people think of is I need to print a piece of paper. Yes, AEM Forms can make you a print piece of paper. You can also do the basic one where you fill it up in Acrobat, you type it all in, and then you can print it. Dynamic interactive forms are a little more interesting. These ones I like because they don't automatically take up the space when you're filling out a section, because sometimes you'll get that. You'll get, especially on a print one, right? They'll give you space for like 4 dependents, and you don't need that space. So this doesn't show any space. And as you continue to interact with it, to Brittany's point earlier, using hidden fields and things of that nature, you can turn sections of it on and off based off of how people are interacting with it. The guided adaptive form, this one is very interesting. This is like an online web application. Don't think form, because that's going to make you think pieces of paper again. Think of like an application. You can go in here, you've got a guided user experience, you have inline validation, you've got different integrations. It's an entire, I can't think of another word other than applications, but it's its own little system within itself. It's really quite powerful and where most forms are going to now. And then the other side of it is case management, any kind of documents you need to produce. The difference between a form and a document being forms capture information, data presented. Think of letters, statements, legal documents, those kinds of things. If we go to the next slide, we can see a handful of examples of different types of forms. So the mobile responsive ones, the beauty of those is that you have one version that can be used across all of your different screen resolutions. You create it, you can put it on a desktop, you can put it on a giant screen, you can use it on your iPad, whatever you want. But you all still have the flexibility of all of these different features that are available to you within AEM Forms. And just like Brittany did, to kind of summarize everything for you, because there's a lot in Forms, I'll move on to the next slide and you can see some of the benefits of AEM Forms. It's got a user-friendly interface, and it's both ways, from the author creation portion of it and from the user interface. If we're talking about it from the author perspective, it's drag and drop. It's very similar to AEM sites, if you've had any experience with AEM sites, where you can come in, drag the components where you want, and it's no code or low code. You're going to do some coding depending on the complexity of what you want to do, which is really the power of AEM Forms. It allows you to do everything you need to do, but you can do inline validation, you can do all kinds of things, the hide and the show, which is done in a similar fashion to Marketo, where you don't actually have to write code. You use the drop downs and it comes out like English, which is very helpful, making it really user friendly. You have the multi-channel output, whether or not you need to have a print version, a version for your phone, a version for your computer, however you need to have it. You can have it in any format you need while not having to make multiple versions. I really want to reiterate that. You only have to create it once. And depending on how you want it rendered, the system can handle that. Real-time data validation, super important. You never want to put bad data into your system, but nothing is more frustrating than you fill out a 10-page document, and then you realize I skipped something at the beginning and now I have to go all the way back there. Or I was filling in the driver's license information and I have to go back and put in a number. I had the thing here, I had the license, let's tell me as I'm filling it out. So you have that real-time data validation as people are using it. There's a centralized content management system for it, similar to AEM Assets, where the real power of this is allowing you to create forms in a more modular sense. So think reusable pieces. I like to think of Lego pieces. So if you have a chunk that you want to reuse in more than one location, a good example could be an address block. An address block standard has standard elements that you will always have appearing. Or another really good one is like terms and conditions. You can create that in its own little chunk, and then the legal team can control that. If they need to go in and change that little chunk, they go here to change that chunk. And every other form that requires that chunk will automatically be updated. The power of having that centralized repository. The integrations, it's an agnostic solution. It can integrate with like anything. There's a lot of connections out of the box that can already be integrated with. But that's really part of the power of AEM Forms, is being able to pull information from different repositories. I have a few examples where I've linked to Salesforce and to Marketo's database, and then there was another one we used, but we can link to like Oracle databases, and it's all in the same form. So it can have multiple connections in the same repository, in that same data capture, which is really powerful. Scalability, because of those Lego pieces, it's easy to quickly grow out and without than having to have a 1-to-1 ratio of forms. Traditional forms are oftentimes, I need one in English for this country with for this state. So you have to have how many versions of this? That scalability and that flexibility of being able to have the hide and show and those Lego pieces really allow you to build out forms really quickly. And security. Forms handle a lot of data, and we care about data. So it's important that forms are secured. There's a lot of different security features with AEM Forms specifically that help make sure that our content is secure. Lots of financial services and lots of government agencies are using it. So very secure. And if you want more details on that, I can get you more details specifically, but very secure. When we look at considerations, the big one would be the cost, because it is a separate piece. You have to buy. It's an enterprise level software solution. And so you really have to make sure that the use case that you're trying to accomplish makes sense for what you're trying to do. If you need to have multiple integrations, if you want to make sure that different members of your team have access to the thing that makes sense for them. Like if we break down creating a form, you have the marketers who would be caring about the look and feel of it. You have the security team who would care about the security permissions and access to that. The IT team would be needing to know all the integration pieces. The form development team would need to be able to have access to the actual skeleton of the elements needing to be captured. Your content experts, like your legal team, would need to have access. If you need that level of granularity, this is something you want to start thinking about, which does bring into some complexity. But once that backbone is set up, it's set up, right? So you may need to find some assistance to help you get that backbone set up. But once you have it going, you're good, right? Like if you were going to like redo your basement or something, like we just did recently, I had an architect come in and make sure I wasn't tearing down walls that would bring my whole house down, that kind of thing, right? But once you know you're good, you can keep going. Maintenance is always a thing you're going to have to take care of. It's a software solution on its own, so it's going to need upgrades and things. If you want to mitigate that, you can move to the cloud, because AEM Forms is in the cloud, and then Adobe would do the upgrades for you. But if you have a local version, you got to keep it updated. And training, I wouldn't say it has a steep learning curve, but there's a learning curve. Anytime you get a new tool, there's a learning curve. So I threw a lot at you there, and I'm sure there's going to be lots and lots of questions. But let's go on to some of these use cases and see if we can get your ideas stirring and having some good thoughts and conversations. Okay, so a bank wants to run a campaign for a new small business lending offer. If we can move to the next animation. The problem, though, is the campaign should include a promotional email with a custom PDF explaining the unique offer for each customer. So we can create the email campaign through Marketo. The tricky part is the custom PDF, and we don't want to have a custom PDF for every single customer. You can't do it. It's not scalable. It's a bad idea. So how can we solve this problem? If we do the next animation, we're saying what I would recommend in this scenario is a dynamic read-only HTML5 version of the form. And so what would happen here is when you're creating your Marketo campaign, you would attach the specific custom PDF, and that custom PDF is going to pull data from Marketo about that known user to personalize the document on the fly for them. So you only have to have one version of that document, and it's only one call in your workflow from Marketo in your journey. And it would say things like, hello, Brittany. I see that you're in whatever industry you work on. Let's say we could have 4 different options. We'd have a retailer, I don't know, a finance, an agricultural, and an entertainment. Those are the 4 different offerings we could have for an organization. But Brittany, we know you, let's say you own a restaurant. Well, we're only going to show you the information for that particular ad because it doesn't make any sense to show you the other ones. And all of that is contained within the PDF that would be sent to people. And from that HTML5 version, people could download it if they wanted a local copy, or they could just view it in their web browser. So it really gives you a more complete version of the journey, because you could totally put that in Marketo, but you lose that PDF, right? You don't have that portion of it. Did you have anything to add to this, Brittany, before I move to the next scenario?
No, I was just going to say, I think that, like Sarah had mentioned in the comment, that's a really cool way, I think, to tie together both Marketo and AEM. And this is a challenge I know I have faced it at companies in the past, where how do you get that personalized PDF with all that information? Because, each customer is different. The data you want to show them is different. So I think this is a really great solution for that.
And you could also extend it further if you had other systems that are tracking information about the user. So you might have some information in Marketo, but you have something in a different CRM somewhere else. Because it can do multiple integrations, you can connect to all the places you need dynamically and have it all combined together. So it's a really powerful thing to see.
Yeah.
We can move to the next use case. So this scenario is building off of what just happened. So the bank would like to follow up on a promotional email with another email to prompt the customer to sign up. So what's the problem now? The recipient should be able to enroll immediately from the marketing correspondence. So if we go back to Marketo being the hub that's running this journey, we can say that they clicked the link in the email, they opened the PDF, so we know they were looking at it. Now we want to send them another offer. So Marketo can handle all of that portion, but how do we do that enrollment piece? And the solution I would recommend would be to have the guided adaptive form. And so the guided adaptive form is that whole application. I know I spoke really quickly of it, but it's that application that can sit in front of it. So it too, being that it's part of AEM Forms, can pull information from different repositories. So we're going to get that information that we had from Marketo, that we know your name is Brittany, that you own a restaurant. So we're going to show you the offers that make sense for a restaurant. And we're going to personalize it. We're going to say, hello, Brittany, we'd like to complete your offer. Here you go. Make it really personalized to you that it makes sense. But what we can also do is have that guided experience with the application. So as you're continuing through, we can make recommendations if there's different options that would make more sense based off of the information that we're gathering about you as you're continuing through the process. We can also have that inline validation. So if we notice something in here that's not quite right, you missed a field, you put the date in the wrong format, anything like that, as you're continuing to go through that application, we can fix it for you as we go through. Again, the application can be done on any device. So if you want to do it on your phone, if you want to do it on your desktop, it's flexible that way, and you only still have to have one version of it. but you can go all the way through it. You can actually also assign like Adobe Sign to the application. So when they're finished the whole process, they can review and you can see the final contract. If it needs to be in a PDF contract, you can get that preview and then have them digitally sign it right there. Complete that. And then when that finishes, you can kick off an AEM Forms workflow that sends information back to Marketo. So that way they know that that whole system went through, so you guys can track it on your end. But something else is probably going to happen too. They enrolled in this, so it's going to have to go to somewhere on their side as well to create a welcome package, or something else is likely to happen after that. An AEM can kick off that further process. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
was just going to say that's exactly what I was thinking. At the end of that, after that form is completed and that data, Marketo would get the signal, form complete. That's a great place to then begin that welcome journey, if you have like a welcome series of emails.
exactly. So they do work really well together. You can merge them quite well together. And the last use case that I wanted to talk about, because this is how Brittany and I started our conversation when we
Yes.
first met in person. A new contact us form needs to be created as part of a campaign. And so the problem here is there's so many different tools. Which tool should I use to create my contact us
Mhm.
form? And if we go in and see what my suggested solution is here, I say it depends. The reason I say it depends, uh, it, there's a lot of things to consider. Every organization has different needs, different requirements, different security concerns. How quickly do you need it turned around? How much does the branding matter to you? Do you already own AEM forms? There's so many things to consider here. And I would not recommend AEM forms for a contact us form. If you're using AEM forms specifically for a contact us form, this is the only reason you're purchasing AEM forms. It's like taking a limousine to go get milk. You can do
That's a
it.
great
I'm not going to stop
analogy.
you. But yeah, right. Like it's a
Yeah.
little bit much.
Yeah.
If you have it though, I do recommend using it because of that modular structure and the way that it cascades back. So if you have AEM forms, you already have like your brand guide already set up and all of those things. So that way your creation of the form will match the rest of your branding, will match all of the rest of the content you already have. And it's already got the security, it's got all the overhead for it.
Yeah.
But if you don't, I mean, it's a little bit much.
Well, the other thing I always consider, and this is what I've told like many teams that I've been on, is like when it comes to creating a form or even just like like a landing page with a form, you need to really consider, is this a one-time use or is this something evergreen, that can expand? Like how you describe some of those other use cases, with like enrollment and stuff like that. That's something that will continue from now till eternity. But if it's like a quick one time event because you're hosting a webinar or a happy hour, those are the times where a lot of times I myself have advocated for Marketo landing page with a form because it's a one-time event. It's really easy for my marketing team to go in and create it, and we're one and done. Versus something that's going to continue on years and years. It should not be in Marketo because chances are it is going to get more complex. If there's things like enrollment, for example, I have been at companies where they tried to create something like that within Marketo, and I would say there's a lot of complexities to that. And so that's another thing to consider when you're trying to figure out, which system, where does this belong? I would also think through, is this a one-time thing or is this something that's going to, continue for many years?
And something you said that it clicked in my head, and I just want to call out on that too. The tools you have, you can do almost anything with, right? Like I remember when this was announced on LinkedIn, somebody asked, "Are you talking about AEM sites forms, or are you talking about
Oh,
AEM
yeah, right.
forms?" And
Good
yes, you
point.
can build it in AEM sites, absolutely. Sites and forms essentially are the same thing under the hood. They convert into HTML. So I know I'm getting technical, but this is a deep dive, so I feel like I can go there. it's all just HTML code at the end. So yes, if you want to build it in AEM sites, you can. The difference here is that Forms has stuff out of the bag that can help you get there faster. It's like, if I go back to construction, how many different tools can cut? Like there's hand saws, there's the little curving saw. And yes, I don't know any of the construction things. I don't do construction, but there's so many things you could use to cut. And depending on what you're trying to do, some just make the job a lot easier than others. You can hack away at it and get it to work, but was it worth the effort? Sometimes you really need to sit down and think, what's the better tool for the job? And if we start thinking about, again, if we go back to people's organizations, there's different hierarchies, and certain departments need to have certain authority over certain things. People are concerned about firewalls, and if stuff is in front of the firewall, behind the firewall. There's lots of things to consider specifically about a contact us form. But if I were to reiterate, this is really not the place for an AEM form. The other two, where they were more complex, to Brittany's point, evergreen solutions, things that are a little more complex, have a little more integration, that's where AEM Forms shines.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I know we got a lot of questions in the chat.
I saw them trickling in, but I haven't been able to keep up with them. So,
can you guys hear me? I can read them out.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Hi, Jen.
Hi, I'm back. Sorry.
Yay.
All right. Yeah, let me go ahead and read some of the questions that came through.
Okay.
First, and some of these I think might have been answered. I've been trying to keep up with them, but good to just put them out there anyway. Well, one of the questions was, does each form have its own repository, or if your organization is using AEM, do the form submissions all go to the same place?
So you can customize where the form submissions go. Typically, there is a repository that somebody wants to store all of the information in. And it also depends on what type of form it is. You guys are Marketo guys, so you're probably thinking CRM, but it doesn't always have to be. It could be like an Oracle database. We do a lot of external sources. We've integrated to Pegasystem, ServiceNow. But the answer is you can configure it per form wherever you need the data to go. And it can go in multiple places. So as you submit, you can send it to 2 different locations if you want. I don't like that. I don't like having redundancy data, but that's a different conversation.
That's interesting. Okay, great. We have another question, which was, how does Marketo handle known visitors on forms, and what should marketers consider when deciding whether to enable this feature?
Yeah, I can take that one. So a known visitor is going to be based on the cookie. So anytime someone has completed a form, they're being tracked through the cookie, which is Munchkin. It's tracking all of their visits, and that's how it knows that it's the same person. And what will happen is when that person returns to the website to like complete a form, or even just any activity, even if they're not filling out a form, because of that cookie, it's going to tie all of that activity back to that person in Marketo. And then was there a second part to the question?
What should marketers consider when deciding to enable the feature? I guess I would think most marketers would probably like all of that. The other thing you have to consider is probably just security and privacy. Like most, I think what it's required now for things like cookie consent banners to be displayed even on your Marketo landing pages, so that people know when they are visiting those pages, whether that be on your website or Marketo landing pages, they need to have the option to be able to accept cookies and know that they're being tracked. So that would be something I think they should consider. All right. And then, can AEM Forms leverage Marketo's form fill validations in real time?
Sorry, can AEM handle Marketo's form filling on real time? Was that the question?
Yeah, so I guess can AEM Forms, you know how Marketo can do form fill validations? It's asking if can AEM Forms leverage Marketo's form fill validations in real time? I think they have another example here, which is
in the case of if you're if you're asking users to enter business email addresses rather than personal emails, can we validate, using a list in Marketo that which is personal versus business? Can that be like sort of propagated to, or I'm sorry, can AEM like basically use that validation to be able to?
So short answer is yes, because technically it's just another integration. And so what we would have to do is code it. There would be coding there. It wouldn't be just straight business user who needed to do this. You would need someone who's a little bit more technical. But if we have that list of rules within Marketo, we can pre-fill a validation rule set. So when they fill in that email field, we can check to see, are you matching that requirement? But something to note about anything technical, that can also be modularized and be reused. So if you have something like that you would need to do over and over again, you can create that as reusable code that can be added in later. So that way, next time you need to do that same validation on the email address, that it's not a work email address or it is a work email address, that piece is already there. It comes back to that framework that you need to set up. Once you understand what you need as a framework and you have everything built, it's much easier to keep going after.
Great. And then another question that came through was, let's see. I think, so does Marketo essentially get signaled by the form fill because the handling of the AEM form is an activity type in Marketo? So I guess that's the question. Is the form fill considered an activity type in Marketo?
Yeah, Angel, I think that goes back to when you were talking about that use case of like having that enrollment form and then it's completed and it's sending to Marketo to then initiate like a welcome series or something like that. Would that be an activity? I guess Marketo would have to see that as some sort of activity in order for that to trigger.
So I'm not super well versed in Marketo. I may have lots of experience with AEM, but not as much with the technical terminology with the Marketo. But yes, I think my answer is yes.
Yeah.
I know you can trigger off of something, like we can send information from AEM Forms to Marketo to trigger something. I just don't know what the specific verbiage of what the pieces are. So my apologies for that.
No, that's okay, because that was my thought too. And Ronald, that's what I was thinking. There must, because I haven't tried that myself yet, but I'm assuming it would be some sort of, I don't know if you would use like a data value change trigger or something to then, initiate that campaign.
Data value trigger sounds like it would work well, because then we could send something and it would just turn the flag on. So that way you would know that that has been triggered. So that sounds like it would be a really good specific way to handle that situation.
Okay. And then there's two more. How effectively does AEM Forms integrate with third-party tools like Zoom Info for online enrichment, especially when enabling smart forms?
I don't think Zoom Info is one that is out of the box, because there are a few that are already there that Adobe's already created. So the integration it's just essentially turn it on. But I have not come across anything where we were not able to integrate AEM with. Just a little bit of code that needs to be written to stitch the two together. But then once it's done, it's there.
Okay, and the last question, does AEM Forms have any built-in UTM tracking mechanisms?
So tracking is not well done in AEM Forms. If you're going to use tracking, I would recommend integrating with something else to help with the tracking. One of the things that you can do is integrate Adobe Target and analytics associated with your forms. So that way the interactions and all of the things that happen within your forms can function the way that they're supposed to. But if there's specific tools that you're already using, don't reinvent the wheel. AEM can do a lot, but if you're already using it, it's better to write that stitching in between and let the tools that you're already using keep using them.
I will say that was one of the challenges I had at a previous company of why I think there though we were using like AEM sites, and they were using like the forms within that, and that because of that issue of not being able to like easily capture UTMs, we did end up switching, like for some of our contact us forms, we switched to Marketo forms because typically in Marketo, I've found that to be fairly simple for capturing UTMs in the hidden fields.
Great. Well, I think that's all the questions we have. And I think we are just about at time. So I want to thank everyone for attending, and we will be sending out the recording and posting this on YouTube as well. Thanks again, everyone. And thanks so much, Brittany and Angel. This was awesome.
Thanks again for inviting me. I'm very excited to talk about how Marketo and Forms can be working together.
Yes, this was a great topic, and hope to do this again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.